Hi everyone, and welcome to EDT-8130. This is our getting started screen here for week 1, and we'll have this appear at the beginning of every web session to explain how to set up your Blackboard Ultra. So you'll start by clicking on the lower right-hand corner tab to open the Collaborate panel, and from there click on the settings icon. Next, you'll perform both the audio and video tests. We may not always use video, but it's good to test that out if you have a camera. And if you happen to encounter a glitch and get disconnected, make sure you keep those settings, but you will set this whole process up at the start of each session. From here, you'll expand the attendees panel in the lower hand corner by dragging it to the left and dropping into the main black screen here, and then open the chat icon in the same lower right-hand corner area to view the chat discussion during class. So whether you are tuning in live, you'll be able to actively chat with your peers, and if you're watching virtually, you'll be able to view the chat that happened throughout the class. As I mentioned, this is EDT-8130 web conference for week 1. And we're going to do a brief quality also at the beginning of each session. So you want to make sure you can hear me clearly, particularly if you are joining in live. Let us know via the text chat or hop on the microphone to let us know if you're having a difficult time hearing. You want to make sure you can see the recording button in the upper left-hand corner. Make sure you've performed the audio and video check we discussed in slide 1, and then make sure your environment is free from distractions. So if you're watching live, it'll be important to make your door is closed, your phone is off the hook, your pets are out of the room if you're at home, or your kids aren't interrupting you throughout the session. If you're watching virtually, it is a little easier to pause the presentation when you need to, but it's good to practice this focus, get ready for the session, take some deep breaths, clear your mind to get started. The learning objectives for this session will be defined by 4 main points. We will define confirmation bias, identify at least one type of confirmation bias, provide a real-world example of confirmation bias, and then describe at least one way collaborative thinking can deter confirmation bias. So as we get started, we'll be covering our textbook, Thinking Collaboratively, Learning in a Community of Inquiry, and the section we'll cover is from Chapter 2 called Thinking and Learning. Throughout this web conference, you'll either want to be able to take notes, or if you have a dual screen and can bounce back and forth, maybe typing into a Word document so you can keep up on the activities that happen here and give you an opportunity to go back later and edit those to submit those with your class assignment. So first we're going to start out with a little optical illusion. We're going to take a look briefly at the image on the screen here, kind of see how this impacts your vision, and if you're like me, you won't want to look at it too long because it does mess with your eyes a little bit. This is going to take us into our first activity, which is just going to be a poll for the class. If you're listening live, you should be able to engage with this poll, and if you're listening virtually, you'll have to go ahead and input your response into your class assignment and address that through here. So go ahead and give me 1 second to input your poll. And I'd like you to go ahead and select yes if you felt all of the lines in that optical illusion appeared to be perfectly straight, and select no if you felt some of the lines in the image appeared to be distorted or crooked in some way. So as you can probably guess, regardless of what our eyes were kind of forcing us to see, evidence by these straight lines shows that all of those boxes and lines in this image are perpendicular. We have 90-degree angles, we have perfect squares, everything lines up exactly along one straight line. So this kind of takes us into confirmation bias because our mind was kind of playing a trick on us. And even if we go back into that first image, we probably still see it as distorted. But as you come through and kind of see that the evidence points to something else, this takes us into the confirmation bias definition. So confirmation bias is really unintentionally ignoring the opposing evidence, and it allows us to continue in our own personal beliefs or viewpoints. So we kind of focus on what we want to see, what we know is in front of us, but ignore some of that evidence that might be contrary to what we believe. And I'm sure most of us have experienced this in different discussions about politics or religion, education, just personal discussions. We tend to gravitate sometimes towards evidence that will support what we personally believe anyway. And again, it's not always intentional, it's usually subconscious, but something that we should be aware of if we do want to do that collaborative thinking and critical thinking. We're going to move ahead next with a video that is from Practical Psychology and covers the 12 cognitive biases. So go ahead and take some time to view this video. It is about 10 minutes long, so you can pause the presentation now. I'm going to use the chat, text chat at the bottom corner to go ahead and insert this link directly to the YouTube video. So you can go ahead, take 10 minutes to view this, and again, take some notes so you can participate in the next activity. Welcome back from the YouTube video. I'd like you to go ahead and select one of the 12 cognitive biases that were outlined in the video. Write that down and then describe a time you experienced a similar situation. So maybe it was your own cognitive bias that you recognized or a cognitive bias of another person. Write down and describe that type of situation, what the cognitive bias was, and how that impacted the situation at hand or how you were able to overcome it at some point. In reducing confirmation bias, we have to look at the group dynamic in collaborative thinking and the ways that we can reduce that confirmation bias. Based on the textbook, this is categorized through 4 different methods: working together to critically explore, interpreting information in relation to previous ideas, challenging and questioning each other's ideas and information, and then working to create new ideas. Sometimes I call confirmation bias the yeah, but complex. So no matter what kind of information you might be presenting, you'll have someone who says, yeah, but I saw this on Facebook, or yeah, but on this blog, or yeah, but I heard from so-and-so. So there's a lot of mixed messages out there that you need to combat, and that's where this group dynamic and the collaborative thinking can be very critical. Our next activity is going to be a photo and an explanation, so you can pause the presentation now if you'd like, or come back to this as part of your after-class assignment. I want you to use Google Images and search for a photo, a non-copyrighted photo, to represent how you can deter confirmation bias in your area of expertise or your field of interest. And then follow with a brief written explanation about how this photo represents your area or represents a type of activity plan that you could implement to deter confirmation bias in that particular field. So in summary, reducing confirmation bias is going to be critical in many areas, whether it's your personal or professional life. It's important to use reliable checks and balances to make sure that you have the best information at hand and you're the most successful in the project or task. At the end of each session, we'll allow time for questions. So again, if you're listening live, go ahead and type questions into the text chat that we can address now. If you're watching virtually, go ahead and use your class assignment to add questions into the end of that document, and we can go ahead and take those and address those either in the pilot discussion or at the beginning of our next web session, depending on how many questions we receive. I think that'll be a great opportunity to still connect the class, whether you are listening live or through a recording. Be sure your assignment is typed into a Word document, and once you're finished, to make sure all of those areas are satisfactory to you, upload those into Pilot, and we will go ahead and review those and have feedback for you before the next class begins. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week for web conference for week 2.